All right, and we're ready to go.
Welcome to the October 27th, 2021 Parks and Recreation Commission meeting. This is a teleconference meeting with commission members, city staff, and members of the public participating remotely to ensure proper social distancing in this federal, state, and local emergency. I'd like to introduce staff and commission members present. Commissioners present include Vice Chair Jennifer Baskin, Commissioner Aurora Brosnan, Commissioner Mark Bryman, Commissioner Peter Diepenbrock, Commissioner Peter Joshua, I believe, is absent. Commissioner Dana Payne is present, and Chair David Thomas. Staff present includes Library and Community Services Director Sean Reinhardt and Assistant Library Services Director Nick Shegda. Nick is also the staff liaison for the commission. Nick, will you please take a moment and provide instructions to the commission and members of the public in attendance on how the meeting will proceed?
Great, so commissioners are asked please to keep your cameras on and microphones off until you are recognized by the chair. You can use that raise hand feature or just physically raise your hand on camera. For members of the public, at various times throughout the commission meeting, the chair will call for public comment, general public comment in the beginning of the meeting for items that are not on the agenda, and then for specific items on the agenda. If you want to make a public comment at any point, you can use that raise hand feature at the bottom of the Zoom screen, or if you're dialing in, press *9. At that point, I will unmute you and you can make your public comment. That's all I got.
Under public comment, the public may address the commission on any subject not listed on the agenda. Each speaker may address the commission once under public comment for a limit of 3 minutes. Please clearly state your name and address or political jurisdiction in which you live. The commission cannot act on items not listed on the agenda, and therefore the commission cannot respond to non-agenda issues brought up under public comment other than to provide general information. Nick, do we have any public comments?
If you'd like to make a public comment at this time, engage that raise hand feature on the Zoom screen. And we have one public comment. It is from Jessica H. Jessica, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to make your public comment. If you would, you can address the Parks and Recreation Commission.
Hello, thank you for your time and attention today. I'd like to read you a letter that I sent to the Parks and Recreation Commission, the Chief of Police, and the Mayor Combs. So the letter is regarding the off-leash practices at Willow Oak School. The letter states, I am very concerned about the off-leash practices at Willow Oak School. I go to Willow Oaks every Monday through Friday to drop my child off at school, my 3-year-old at preschool. I usually arrive with my daughter between 7 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. There's an attached picture of dogs off leash that was sent in. I also have videos, and my daughter has been knocked over and ran over by these dogs that were off leash, and the owners displayed little concern when the dog knocked over my daughter and ran her down. I've tried to ask them to put their dogs on the leash, but unfortunately it's been met with much resistance. I've called the police non-emergency number a number of times every day, at least once a day, because it happens twice a day. There's about 20 dogs out there. But the problem is that it takes a few hours for someone to come out, and by that time the offenders are gone. My concern is that the dog owners are not following the posted sign, using the fenced-in dog park instead of a public space, and do not have concern for the children that attend either of the schools in close proximity. I am hoping that we can all work together to find a solution that meets everyone's needs and protect the children who attend the school near this park. I've tried to work with the dog owners and school, but it seems like a third party needs to get involved.
Great.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. If anyone else would like to make a public comment, go ahead and raise your hand at this time. And seeing none.
Okay, seeing none, the next thing on the agenda is to accept the Parks and Recreation Commission minutes for the meeting of September 22nd, 2021. Do we have any public comments on this item, Nick?
Anyone would like to make a public comment? Please use that raise hand function on your Zoom screen or press *9 on your phone now. See no public comment on this item.
Would a commissioner like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the September Parks and Recreation meeting.
I'll second that.
Great, I can go ahead and call the roll. Commissioner Payne,
I'll abstain as I was absent.
Commissioner Bryman, you're muted, Commissioner Bryman.
You're muted.
No,
I'm sorry. Yeah, I too
There you
was absent, but I don't want to prevent that from, so I really shouldn't be voting on it, but if that's the only way we're going to pass the thing, then let me know.
okay. So well, I guess we'll call you abstain for now.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. Commissioners do not need to have been present at the meeting for the minutes capture in order to vote on the minutes. Totally, of commissioner's preference, but there's no prohibition on it.
I was just wondering whether or not you're going to have enough votes to pass the thing. So that's why I brought it up.
I think we probably will, but let's find out. Commissioner Brosnan, how do you vote?
I'll vote yes.
And Chair Thomas, how do you vote?
Yes.
So the motion passes 4-0 to 1 with Commissioners Payne and Bryman abstaining and Commissioner Joshua absent.
Okay, the next thing on the agenda is the Parks and Recreation Commission Work Plan Subcommittee. So Assistant Director Nick Shegda will give a brief staff introduction to this item.
Thank you, Chair. This is a holdover from a September item. So every year now, it used to be every 2 years, but every year now, the commission is tasked with making a work plan, which will sort of guide their actions for the coming year. That plan is developed by the commission and then taken usually by the chair to the city council, where the city council approves it. In the staff report, I have links to the most recent work plan for the Parks and Recreation Commission. Let me see if I can bring that up. Nope, that's the staff report. I apologize. Don't want the staff report. I want the most recent plan. Here we go. Apologies here while I fumble around on my computer screen. There we go. Can you guys see that? This is the work plan and achievements from 2018-2020. I believe you guys were working on updating this right before COVID hit. So this sort of is presented to the council every year. It shows that you're in alignment with the council's goals and then shows progress that you've made toward those goals. So you had 4 initiatives in 18-20. I'll go from top. Sorry, I don't mean to make you seasick here or Zoom sick, which was provide high quality and inclusive programs and services that meet the diverse and changing needs of all Menlo Park residents and neighboring communities. Ensure city parks and facilities are well maintained. Scrolling down, lots of achievements on that one. Improved class and program offerings. partnerships and sponsorships to increase the quality and accessibility of the various programs that the city provides, and support initiatives, partnerships, and projects that intersect with the city's park and community services, resulting in well-coordinated efforts to meet the needs of residents. So these are pretty good goals, but with the changes from COVID and the changes in the department and the changes in the council's goals, it is time to revisit them. And staff are suggesting that you guys can form a subcommittee of 2 or 3 members who would then have meetings offline and sort of do some work and bring it back to the full commission for a little more work and approval. And if you guys have any questions about the staff report or the process, happy to answer those.
Yeah, thanks for the summary, Nick. Yeah, I think that's a great idea, maybe to have a smaller group that really focuses on this, and it'd be great if it could be comprised of newer commission members as well as people that have gone through this before. I'm happy to be one person on that subcommittee. Is there anyone else who's interested in engaging with this process?
I'm happy to be involved. I'm guessing that that's the purpose of this discussion, is to form that subcommittee. So I'm in.
Awesome. So Mark and I are in. It'd be great if we could get one more at least. Is there anyone else who would be excited to engage with the planning process?
I'd be happy to join the subcommittee.
Awesome. So then maybe we can start with the 3 of us for now. And if anyone else is interested in joining, then we can sync up offline. Okay, awesome. So I think, do any other commission members want to say anything about this, or their experience with the planning process in the past? Okay, hearing none.
I have a quick question, David. Are we on a future agenda for this subcommittee to report back? Has that been arranged yet or no?
It hasn't been arranged yet, but that'd be something that would happen in the future. So yes, it will be arranged.
And I would imagine we'll have a good discussion then about what we've done and what else needs to be done. So.
True. I could just offer, oh, I'm sorry, looks like Vice Chair Baskin has her hand up.
Hi, just to add a couple of historical points on, and this feels very far back because it's probably 2 years plus since we've had a sort of the informal, normally we meet over a meal and kind of go through this planning process, but some of the key points that we were trying to hone in on, wrapped around kind of communications, which are really important now still too, sustainability, one community. But my advice is, if the group wants to get really prescriptive and direct about what they want to focus on, that kind of helps bringing it back to the commission, so we have real kind of points to work on and talk about. So I think a lot of the work plan goals are really great and lofty, and then it gets really good for the subcommittee to kind of hone in on maybe like really actionable items, and then this way it'll make us feel good about kind of putting forth parts of the plan that we can action sooner.
Okay, Commissioner Baskin, that's a really great point. So if I hear you correctly, we both want to have these broader kind of open-ended goals as well as actually tangible, achievable goals. And hopefully the other commission members that have volunteered to be part of this are okay with trying to come up with very more detailed, actionable items. Any other?
And I don't want to like put and they can obviously, since you guys have so kindly volunteered for the subcommittee, make it your own, what you feel like you want those points to be. And I'm sure that we're all going to be able to have a healthy discussion about them. But I do think just from some past comments from other commissioners that felt like, oh, things move a little slowly, or what are we doing to action? That was just some feedback from some people who had been on the commission before and have chosen to move on, that I think that could kind of keep us more accountable and maybe give us some excitement about the work plan.
Okay, great. Yeah. Thank you for this feedback. If there aren't any other comments on this item.
Sean, do we need to take a vote to appoint subcommittee members, or can that be done by acclamation? Do you know?
I think acclamation is perfectly fine here if it's something everyone's generally agreeable to.
All right. Sorry to interrupt you, Commissioner, Chair Thomas.
Staff Liaison Nick, would you mind describing how the acclamation process starts? Can I motion for that?
It's basically, you don't have to make a motion and vote. It's basically like we approve the agenda, calendar, planning calendar items. It's basically everybody's in agreement.
Okay, cool.
And so by volunteering, you assume that the subcommittee members are in agreement to be on the subcommittee and no one else is objecting. So you don't have to have a formal vote. We can have a formal vote if you want, but you don't need to have one.
Okay, great. It seems like we're ready to move on to the next step. So for the next step, Assistant Director Nick Shegda will give a brief staff introduction on the Menlo Park Community Campus Programming.
So you're stuck with me again. And then in this staff report is basically helping to set up for next month's joint meeting with the Library Commission. And what I did was pull together a lot of the background information. Now, there have been a lot of studies that have been done asking the residents of Bellhaven what kind of programs and services they would like, what kind of facilities they would like as part of the planning process for both planning for a new branch library, which the library went through, and also sort of neighborhood studies and the Parks and Rec facilities master plan. So those are rather long documents, those studies. We had some public comment on this item in the Library Commission meeting, which led me to sort of lead a couple of other links in there. And those were links to some of the planning meetings for the new Menlo Park Community Campus facility that were run by Hart Howerton and Facebook. So just kind of honing in, I think for the commission, there's a lot of background material. So wanted to get it to you early. I don't know that you need to read all of it. I would say hone in on the parts where there's direct feedback from the community about what they wanted. And also, I might suggest looking at the outreach methods that were successful. So what were the best ways to get input in from the community? Because that's something that the Parks and Rec Commission and the Library Commission could be really helpful in doing, is being a conduit for this information and facilitating this discussion with the community about what kind of programs they would like to see in the new NPCC. I think that's it for my summary. Sean, did I leave anything out there that you'd like to add in?
No, Nick, that's outstanding. Hopefully that helps the commissioners kind of zero in on the items that are going to be most helpful for them next month.
And if there are any questions, I'm happy to field them.
I have a quick question about the expected timing on that. I know that they've broken ground. I've been by there. I have a friend who lives close by. We walk over the bridge. We play tennis. It's kind of fun to see that they're making a lot of progress there. What's the timing like? When do they expect to be finished? Or what's the target, I should say?
Got you. the great question. The groundbreaking is scheduled for this Saturday. Nope, sorry, week from Saturday, November 6th. Sorry, I was jumping the gun. And after that, they're going to work pretty quickly to prepare the pads. So they have to do a lot of sort of more fill and grading of the site. And then the actual construction part where they're actually building the steel is supposed to start, I think, later this year, November, December-ish. All of that will go on for some time. But basically, we're looking at early to mid 2023. So 18
So Nick, what I've
months.
been seeing is purely demolition. That's not considered groundbreaking. They're just tearing things up. Is that what I'm saying?
Yes, knocking things down and processing that the materials from the old building to see what they can recycle and put back into the sort of base rock layer or use in the pad construction or use to fill and grade the site because they have to fill in the pool and some other things out there. Yes, so they haven't actually started construction. I guess it's all construction. They're site prepping now, and they're going to start doing the pads and the foundation work soon.
And Nick, do we have any public comment on this item? I believe a member from the Library Commission may be on this call, and if they are, it'd be interesting to hear their perspective and areas where they think we might have the most joint interest in the upcoming joint meeting.
Sure. Go ahead and call for public comment. Go ahead and use that raise hand feature at the bottom of the Zoom screen, or *9 if you're a dial-in participant. And it looks like we do have a public comment, and it's David Earhart. Mr. Earhart, you can go ahead and make your comment to the commission.
Thank you, Chair Thomas. This is David Earhart, the chair of the Library Commission. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the joint meeting next month, and I think, as you mentioned about where the areas of overlap and the areas where there's some unique focus on that commission, and, I think the primary thing we're interested in is how to make best advantage of the joint use facility that amplifies the library offering, the sort of the community effect of the library function itself, and then also be attentive to programming and space uses that don't inhibit the use. So it's really kind of making sure we take advantage of the joint facility and also respect the uniqueness of potentially the library experience for Menlo Park residents, and and choose our programming choices in terms of timing or location or just noise or whatever the dimension is that would potentially interfere with the library function, and just kind of go forward with an open and curious mind about how to make that really successful. So I think I'm very interested in seeing how the two commissions can work collaboratively to maximize the benefit and minimize the potential interference with either the Parks and Rec sort of charter or the Library Commission charter. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. And I see no other hands raised for public comment at this time.
Okay, we'll open this up to commission discussion. And actually, David, who just provided public comment, and I met a week ago. And I guess one of my biggest takeaways is that we're kind of transitioning from a phase where the commission's interaction with the community is more kind of on questions like what to build, and progressing to a stage where it's more centered around questions on how to use. So I think we have an exciting meeting coming up. Some example things that we might discuss are things like membership policy, or should there be prices for classes, and should the Belhaven neighborhood get first access or priority access? these are a few of the different things that will probably come up. And so, yeah, now it's open up. So I'd love to hear other commissioners' thoughts.
Are we wanting to formalize somehow our end of this bargain? Are we trying to come up with discussion points that speak directly to what our responsibility may be for this meeting, or are we waiting to see how the meeting goes?
I mean, maybe a little of both. I think it would be good to kind of review that background material, think of the things that you've heard during your time as commissioners that residents have been asking for as a way to sort of think about starting this process. So this is not going to be the only opportunity for the public to weigh in on programming at the new facility. This is sort of the kickoff of the process. So I think from the staff side, we'd like to hear at the meeting in November, certainly hear what the members of the public have to say, but also maybe hear a little bit from both commissions about some of these policy issues that might come up with a joint use facility, and also hear a little bit about the process that we're going to undertake. What do you think would be the best way to gather that input? You know, do we have public meetings? Yes. Do we have focus groups? Do we send out surveys? You know, what they call intercepts, which is basically people with clipboards going out and talking to people where they are, out at Kelly Field, at the grocery stores. All of these methods were used during a lot of those different studies that are linked there in the report. And we'd like your opinion on all of those things.
Yes, and just to add to that, I think Nick gave a good overview of like some of the instruments and the techniques that could potentially be used to ensure robust community engagement. But I think as referenced earlier, we're sort of transitioning into a new phase of the project, which is, you know, there's been a lot of community discussion about what people want from this facility, and that's how the various components were added to the design. Folks wanting the library and the recreation and other components to be in the same facility, and wanting to, you know, still have a pool, and all those other things have been determined. So now it's getting more into kind of the rubber meeting the road kind of discussion. Like, here's what we've heard from all this background information. Let's kind of do some confirmation with the community now that we're really getting into game plan. And so a lot of this, I think, really is about game plan. There have been some reference to policies. There'll need to be a lot of policy kind of review and policies established for the new facility. Do residents get some extra level of priority to access the facility? Is that by neighborhood or by city residents? Are there particular user groups that, you know, we want to really ensure have some level of access? All the way down to details like there's a makerspace programmed in the facility, and that's kind of vaguely defined, like what type of maker activities, you know, really should be in there on day one. So it's an iterative process, and I would say, although it feels like we're just embarking on it in a way, we're kind of at the 2/3 mark, really. So we want to make sure that we're building on input we've gotten from the community before, and just really kind of refining it. And how do we translate that into the staff, into the hours of operation, into fees, into other policies and things of that nature? I hope that's helpful.
Having just formed a subcommittee for this sort of work plan, I'm wondering if it can somehow dovetail in some way, or if there's maybe another subcommittee for this particular item. Or are we having a discussion tonight, right now?
You know, it might be helpful to have the discussion about like another subcommittee or working group in the context of the joint meeting, because it could be that perhaps the two commissions may want to kind of join forces on that effort.
Right.
So as not to duplicate or anything.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, but certainly I can see this process occupying some of the Parks and Rec Commission's time for the coming year. So I think it's going to end up on your work plan,
Right.
sort of these meetings and sort of helping the community have this conversation to get the new facility as it's constructed, outfitted, and programmed, and the policies set for the new facility.
Am I to understand correctly that our next meeting together is that joint meeting, and we're not going to be meeting as a group before that again?
That's correct. November 15th will be the next meeting for the Parks and Recreation Commission. I think there may be some small items that each commission deals with separately before the main order of business goes into discussion. Just a quick note on that, you'll probably be getting a flurry of meeting cancellation notices from me. Don't be upset by that. We have to cancel the regular meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission and then issue a special meeting agenda, a joint meeting agenda. So you'll see those things pop up, and I'll before I send them out, I'll make sure to send an email saying, no, we're still having a meeting. It's just we have to officially, due to the Brown Act, cancel the regular meeting and issue an agenda for the special meeting.
That said, Nick, I wonder, would it behoove us at all to meet as a separate group before we go into the meeting so that we're on the same page, as it were, going into this joint meeting? In other words, an opportunity for this new subcommittee to report in somehow, and instead of us waiting yet another month for us to meet. I don't know. I don't know if that's even legal. You tell me.
Maybe I can chime in on that. That is a great suggestion, and I think Commissioner Bryman, what you kind of began this discussion with is the prospect of maybe somehow the work plan subcommittee. How could that plug in? And I think what we've been talking about and what Assistant Director Jagda just mentioned is, this work preparing for the MPCC facility will be a substantial portion of the commission's time in the next couple of years. And so it does make sense for it to be incorporated into the work plan. You're right, there are there are Brown Act issues that you really can't convene the commission
Okay.
outside of a actual noticed meeting. However, the subcommittee, can meet without those noticing requirements. So it might be good to have that group maybe in the discussion about the work plan, maybe talk through some kind of initial recommendations for this commission as well as for the joint meeting, just so that folks are going in with a little bit more of a game plan. I don't know if that's helpful, but just from a Brown Act perspective, I would say the subcommittee is probably your best way to get some folks together to map some things out in more detail in advance.
Agreed. I guess my question really is that I would like us as this subcommittee to meet certainly within the next week or two, let's say, and to kind of report back before our next meeting, which is now going to be a month from the next meeting, right? So
Yes.
I'm wondering if, oh, sorry, did I lose you?
You did not lose us. We can hear you.
Okay. I'm just wondering if maybe this subcommittee should in fact report to the joint meeting.
Absolutely. That certainly could be added to the agenda, and even accompanied by something written in the form of a staff report or a report out that goes into the agenda packet. I think that would be beneficial to the library commission folks as well, because it gives them some advanced information to absorb.
More people to think about what it is that we've come up with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think these are all good points. And perhaps before we move on, Nick or Sean, can you just kind of maybe walk us through what to expect at the joint meeting? Like, my understanding is that there will probably be a lot of community members present to provide feedback on some items that might kind of drive some of the discussion. Is that correct?
I would hope that we get a lot of community members attending, because you want to hear what they have to say. And you want to sort of get a check, especially if we'll write a staff report, which kind of maybe summarizes some of the input that we've gotten so far from the community and maybe shapes the discussion a little bit. And like, here are the points that we think that the two commissions can really weigh in on and sort of do the best, sort of do their best work. So I expect there will be some sort of there will be some small business for each commission, a little bit, approving minutes and things. And then also, I think PRC usually approves field user groups, which is that can actually be pushed off to December or January if you want, because I don't think there are new, I talked to Todd today, there aren't new field user groups. They're the same field user groups who applied last year. Just small business items like that. And then we would get into the sort of meatier discussion about MPCC is starting. How do we start the discussion about how we're going to do this? And that's where there will be room for lots of public comment. And I think we should expect, well, I would hope that we get a lot of community involvement and public comment into that discussion.
With that said, I'm wondering if we should, or are we planning on, is there a plan to encourage the public to attend this special meeting? Right, we talk a lot about communications and letting people know this is a special meeting. And I think instead of just hoping that they show up, is there something that we can do to drive attendance, as it were?
Well, let me chime in there, because I think this is actually it's a point for clarification among the group here. And I know that the Library Commission Chair is present as well. So the community conversation about programming the new facility is certainly going to extend over the next year plus. And there has been a lot of discussion already with the community stretching back to 2013 and earlier about like what people kind of envision for this facility. So I think staff's kind of perspective, and one of the reasons why this proposal has kind of come together to have a joint meeting, is more about getting a game plan together between the two commissions. How are these two commissions going to structure that process as it touches the commissions, so that it's most productive for the community members participating, for the commissioners participating, and what product do you kind of want to get from the end of that process? So certainly community members, I think, should be encouraged to attend and weigh in. That's probably not the main event for really collecting a lot of community feedback. It's more like, hey, let's get the game plan together for the year ahead. I think at least that's, I think, where the staff was coming from with it, and where we think might be the most productive use of all the commissioners' time at the front end of the process. And so next month, I think what the staff, and we could kind of check in with this work plan subcommittee maybe to kind of bounce it off of the group, and we'll meet in the next week or two, is certainly a presentation and overview with the background of the project, including the community input received to date, go over sort of the main basic key aspects of the project, and begin to sort of outline sort of a process and a timeline for, and whether there's surveys or it's community meetings or the different forms of input, tours of other facilities, things like that, and get that all mapped out so that we have a game plan. And so we present all of that, and then that would give the two commissions opportunity to kind of basically give their input and say, yes, we like that, or no, we want to go a different direction. But this really is a meeting of the commissions, and so this is really just kind of staff's sort of recommendation on that. Totally open to framing it a different way if you think there's some other way to go about it.
Makes sense to me.
Okay, it sounds like we have a good starting point for our next meeting, and sounds like that will be exciting. If there aren't any other comments on this topic, then we can move to informational items. I see no hands raised. Okay, so moving on to informational items. Informational items are transmitted to the Parks and Recreation Commission and staff's effort to provide an update on matters of importance to the commission. Informational items are not action items. However, a commissioner, city staff member, or a member of the public may request to make a comment or ask a question on any of the informational items. So the first informational item, I think we already alluded to. So I met with the chair of the Library Commission, David Earhart, to start discussing what the meeting next week will look like, and kind of where we are in this process and what kind of things will come up. I spoke to a few of these things earlier. Maybe I'll quickly run through a few more specific things that came up. So there are questions like how the library policies would change, or the Bellhaven branch, whether the city wants to run different facilities or perhaps contract some of the programming out. Things like whether we want to hold basketball tournaments there, how kind of time at the swim pool will be allocated. Is an upgrade to Kelly Park kind of within the scope of this? And so, yeah, I think that's a good summary. And so, yeah, that'll be an exciting meeting. So staff liaison Nick, do we have any public comment on this item?
I'd like to make a public comment on item E1. Raise your hand using that raise hand feature in the Zoom app, or dial *9 on your phone. See no public comment on this item.
Okay, great. So the next thing, informational item, is a department update.
I've got a couple of items I wanted to share with the commission. We met, Sean and I met, which we do monthly, with the Public Works team to sort of go over issues. One of the things that they were talking about was the playground improvement project at both Burgess and Willow Oaks Park. And so right now they're looking at gathering some input on the new playground improvements. So these are improvements to the play areas themselves and the play structures, not necessarily to, not the larger project, which is a bigger undertaking of adding bathrooms and doing the dog park refresh at Willow Oaks Park. Public Works has already met with the 3 schools that surround Willow Oaks Park, those stakeholders, to get their input. And now they're looking for public input. They have these A-frames with posters and QR code links to some short surveys. So I urge the commissioners to go and take a look at the survey. The timeline that they've talked about for this project is getting the survey information back, having the consultants come up with some possible designs based on the surveys and the budget limitations, and then bringing that back to the public in the early part of next year, and then bidding out the project and construction of the new play facilities there in spring or summer. The next slide is just a reminder once more of the joint Library Commission meeting on November 15th. So not our normal third Wednesday, it'll be the third Monday of November. And then a reminder about the MPCC groundbreaking ceremony a week from Saturday from 10 to 11 a.m. Sean, do you have any other updates you'd like to add in there?
Thank you, Nick. Just one other, which is that in order to facilitate the senior center program, preparing the meals for the seniors, they serve a lunch to older adults every day during the week. They've been, as you know, temporarily relocated to the Arriaga Recreation Center since the Menlo Park Senior Center is torn down during construction of the new facility. And we've had to have boxed meals brought in because the kitchen at the Arriaga Center wasn't in condition to serve meals. Well, I'm pleased to report that we have completed improvements to the Arriaga Recreation Center kitchen to pass health inspections as a commercial kitchen. And the senior center team is preparing to start in-house prepared meals for senior center users starting December 1st. It's a big deal for us. The senior center program really was built around those hot prepared lunches, a big draw for the seniors. In some cases, like their only hot meal, per day. So we're really pleased to be able to bring that back December 1st. And long term, it's an upgrade to the Arriaga Recreation Center kitchen that gives it a much more better capacity kitchen. So that's all I've got to add to the other updates. Thank you.
Yeah, so maybe next we'll open up to public comment. Nick, do we have any public comment on this item?
If anyone would like to make public comment on item E2 department updates, use that raise hand feature in Zoom or *9 on your phone. And seeing none.
Okay, I'd love to open this up to the commission. I think the Menlo Park Community Center groundbreaking would be a really great opportunity for all of the commissioners that can make it to celebrate progress and get together. Would it be possible to send out an email to all the commissioners the week of the groundbreaking?
Absolutely. As a reminder, yes. And as a reminder also that parking is going to be very limited looking at the site today. So you may want to carpool, or if the weather is nice, you might want to ride your bike because there's not going to be a lot. There's ASO soccer games on the back field at Kelly Park that morning. And the construction and the sort of seating area that we've got laid out for the groundbreaking ceremony is going to eat up most of the parking. So there's not going to be a lot of parking at the facility. We're hoping that neighborhood residents will walk or bike as they did before to get to the location there of where Onetta Harris was located. But I caution you that parking is going to be challenging. I think I'm probably going to ride my bike. So, and yes, it's absolutely doable to send out an email reminder in middle of next week, say.
Thank you. Thank you. That would be very helpful. And I'll repeat myself that if you're on the other side and you park, if you drive to one of the streets in, Flood Park area that is close to the bridge, I've been doing this for a while now. You walk over and you're at Kelly in no time.
That's a good tip. Yeah, it's a very short walk. I can't remember the name of the street, but if you drive down,
Well, if you actually stay on Ringwood,
yes,
go all the way
then
down.
Park,
the bridge.
there's a bike and pedestrian bridge that goes over the freeway.
It's right there.
Dumps you out right by the Boys and Girls Club, which is like 2 blocks away from the site. So.
Awesome. Well, if there are no further commissioner comments, we can move on to the final informational item. Nick, would you like to present this one?
Sure. Let me go ahead and share my screen. This is the tentative agenda calendar. For next month, I kind of have penciled in that field user approval, but it doesn't need to stay there. Like I said, it can probably shift to December if we have a December meeting, or January. January is starting to pick up a little bit there. You can see we've got a mid-year review, sort of looking back on program reactivation, and a couple of program reviews, the pickleball pilot, and the aquatics program data. Still to be scheduled are some items that have been kind of hanging around for a while, but haven't been scheduled yet. Most of them waiting on some more development or more information. Parks and Recreation Facilities Master Plan update, Nealon Park update, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiative update, and a presentation from Facebook about a new park that's going to be on Facebook property. I need to scroll down. Can everyone see that okay?
Yeah, this looks good. Do we have any public comment on this item?
If anyone would like to make a public comment on this item, please use that raise hand feature on the Zoom screen now. I do not see any public comment. Let's stop sharing so we can
Sure.
see each other again.
Yeah, I saw that the screen share went down, but I think we would want to add to November 15th, the work plan subcommittee report out.
Yeah, that's a great point, because it's going to be a while before we can report that back, given that we have a recess in December.
Right.
I guess the one downside is, wouldn't that mean that the Library Commission would also have to sit through this report? I'm trying to think, are there any other options available to us?
This is why I was wondering, again, you guys know the rules. Is there any reason why we couldn't not cancel our meeting and expedite that meeting and then move into the next meeting? Is there a time frame that we have to fit within, or something that doesn't allow us to do that? When I see that recess in December, I'm thrilled for it. We're going away. It'll be terrific, but we're putting stuff off. And like the pickleball thing is one example, where I think that we're going to have more to discuss. And I wonder if there's any way of getting that in before the end of the year.
So certainly, if the commission would like to have, it's a standalone meeting aside from the joint meeting with the Library Commission, that's totally the prerogative of the commission to call a special meeting. I would just point out one of the reasons why the November regular meeting inconvenient, because the fourth Wednesday of the month is the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So having a meeting on that date might be kind of challenging for some folks, and they already have plans to go somewhere else. So it could be that a better option would be to seek to reschedule the December meeting to, not the fourth Wednesday. I think that's just my main concern, is that the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, you might have a difficulty getting a quorum.
Well, that makes sense too, right? The 22nd, I get people being gone. The 24th, I get people being gone, but maybe, look, if nobody wants to do it, fine. Earlier in December might make sense.
That's a possibility. So the regular scheduled meeting for this commission, the fourth Wednesday, is December 22nd. Maybe moving that a week earlier to December 15th would be, the commission might be amenable to that. We'd have to take a vote on that and have it on the agenda for the November 15th meeting, if we were going to move the regular meeting and not just cancel it.
Well, I will say that it does coincide, right? It's exactly a month after the other meeting that we've changed, which is the 15th. So the 15th, then we start the new year again.
Yeah, and we encounter this pretty regularly with the library commission because they meet on Mondays. So there's a number of like Monday holidays that just, they have to reschedule their meeting. And so they'll either do it the week after or the week before. So there's plenty of precedent. I think it's just if the commission wants to meet maybe December 15th instead of 22nd, that's absolutely doable. We just have to change the date and notice it to the public properly.
So then it seems like the solution we're kind of converging on is that we can vote on this next time. Is my understanding correct?
Yes.
Yes, although there could, since this is on the agenda in the form of the tentative agenda calendar, right? So you're discussing the future agendas. And so the date is obviously, part and parcel with that. So you certainly reserve like any kind of formal vote for next month, but I would say now would be a good time to voice any like strong objections or conflicts or alternate suggestions so that we can go into next month. Kind of
But
understand what the
formally,
commission's desire is.
formally, Sean, it needs to be on the agenda, and so therefore we can only vote on it next time. We can discuss it now, get a good sense that we're willing to do it or not, but only formalize it next meeting.
Well, let's, I think Nick and we should confirm with the city clerk whether that vote is necessary or not. I don't want to say that's absolutely required. I think let's plan to do that in case it is required next month. But I don't want to get out in front of the city clerk and say, oh yeah, you have to vote on that, whereas maybe you don't. I'm not sure. We have to check that.
All right.
But it sounds like maybe December 15th is an option though. Commission's amenable to?
I'm certainly up for it. I don't know if there's any other hesitation or if there is any.
I would
Yeah,
be
I'm
fine
also,
to meet that day in December.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Brosnan, I couldn't hear the first part of your comment where you kind of expressing like that date would work for you.
Sorry about just blurting that out. I would be fine. I'm just saying that I would be fine with the earlier December meeting.
Thank you.
okay. So it seems like we have a couple commissioners that are okay with this. It is close to the holidays, so I think it's understandable that people have other commitments, and maybe next time we can kind of put this to a vote to see if we have the quorum. Otherwise, if there aren't any further comments on this, we will move to commissioner reports. Okay, see no hands raised. Okay, individual commissioner reports. I guess one in kind of information item that I'll mention here that I thought was a really cool idea is, and Nick can kind of fill in the story here. My understanding is that Todd Zio offers these tours of all the parks to some of the city staff, and this could be a pretty cool opportunity for commissioners, particularly new commissioners, to get to see all the parks and also kind of get a tour from someone that is an expert on them. So Nick, I guess I'd love to hear kind of more about these tours, and then maybe we can discuss it.
Sure. Well, it's something that I believe the Parks and Rec Commission has done in the past, and Vice Chair Baskin can sort of fill us in on that. It's something that I'm asking Todd to show me around in my new role in the merged department, so I can learn more about the parks and programs. And I'm finding them super useful to just go and look at all the parks, see how people are using them. I mean, to really get a great idea, you need to go at different times of the year, at different times of day. But really, as an introduction and sort of a check on what's going on at the parks. I find it super useful. So if that's something that the commission is interested in, I think if there's more than a quorum of commissioners, you have to agendize it as a meeting, I believe, a special meeting. But maybe Commissioner Diepenbrock can speak to that, or Commissioner Baskin.
I'm not really sure how it works. How long does the tour take?
Well, it depends on if you're trying to do all the parks in one day or just hit the highlights, I guess. I mean, I think it would be nice to go look at some of the parks where the commission is receiving comments from the public. For instance, you know, we heard about Willow Oaks Park tonight from a public commenter. We hear about tennis and pickleball at Nealon Park. We hear about Kelly Park. And Burgess is probably one of the highest used parks, but we haven't heard a lot about that. I think maybe we're all maybe a little more familiar with Burgess than with some of the other parks. We hear about Sharon Hills Park. There's a lot of parks actually, and small parklets in Menlo Park. But I wouldn't.
So
think
historically, do you mind if I chime in,
Nope,
Nick?
jump right in.
Okay, so historically, what we did was we would select 3 parks for the park tour. And so we discuss this at the meeting ahead and say what 3 parks are relevant. And generally, they would be parks that are higher up on the work plan or something maybe we want to address on the work plan. And also, they'd have to be near each other. There was one instance where we tried, you know, we really did want to go on both sides of town, and it does just add to the meeting just being able to commute that. So my recommendation is to avoid that. But if it's absolutely possible, you know, necessary, then we do it. But I think you really don't want to do more than 3, especially since we are going to agendize where we're going. And at times, like specifically when we were at Nealon Park, some people were very interested in the dog park, came up and joined the meeting and commented there. And so what I do think is great about it is that we're like hands-on, seeing what's going on in the parks, talking to the people. We're out there, they're knowing us, we're knowing them, especially to parks that we feel like maybe need a little TLC or have controversial issues. We're there and seeing them and hearing them. So I think that that's kind of the way we should maybe think about planning around that. That's the way we've done it in the past. And then whenever it is appropriate, I do have one piece of public comment, one piece of commissioner report I wouldn't mind reporting about, but whenever that's relevant. Oh, and one other thing, we generally used to do it at a summer meeting, just because we felt like there would be more people out. We don't have to wait for that, but just better to probably have a better weather meeting because it's bright outside and it's still at the time of our meeting. And I think we're running into daylight savings times issues like in a week or 2. So something to think about in regards of timing.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that feedback, Commissioner Baskin. Maybe we can take a few more comments on this, and then we would love to hear your report. Are there any further comments? I think Commissioner Baskin had some great points about, you know, maybe this is the wrong time of year to be considering you know, this kind of event, and also about kind of the locality and trying to do maybe 3 in close proximity. I'd love to hear from other commissioners. Is anyone else really interested in this? Yeah, any other feedback?
I'm wondering if we can kind of, pardon the expression, kill 2 birds. In other words, we don't have to, we do smaller groups, we don't have to agendize, and we cover more ground. 3 go to 3 go to 3 others, and we come back and we talk about it. So that we're not necessarily needing to formalize this thing, but we can get more done.
Yeah, that's a really interesting suggestion. Um, No, I actually really like that suggestion. Yeah, maybe we could, have two groups of three, and then maybe as kind of an informational update at a future meeting, the different groups could present on kind of, what they saw or any conclusions or findings they have.
We just cover more parks, right? We don't have to do just three. We can get
Yeah.
16 or 7 or 8.
Yes, and then the times, of course, can be whatever works for
Right,
the participants.
right.
So
And not having to formalize it with an agenda, we can be a little more flexible.
So if that's amenable to the commission, maybe that's something staff could work on, and maybe working with Chair Thomas is maybe produce some proposed dates at different parks when in particular like Mr. Zio would be available, and kind of throw them out there and some kind of sign up.
Oh, right. Well, there's only
sheet.
one pod, so yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, it's kind of like a sign up sheet kind of deal where first 3 sign up for a particular tour, then it's on, and we would field it. So we could take that kind of approach and just kind of do that by email. So just one proposal for kind of how to coordinate it.
Yeah, this sounds great. It seems like there's some interest, so maybe we can connect, propose a few dates, and then during the next meeting we can kind of figure out who would be interested in this and how we'd make the cohorts. So if there aren't any additional comments on this, I don't see any hands up. Perhaps we could go to Commissioner Baskin's report.
So this is unfortunately not a very formal report and one super relevant to parks, but I will say it's relating to parks and schools. And I'd say school grounds are meeting places where people gather. Unfortunately, a really big topic of discussion amongst parents lately has been about safety and traffic safety and pedestrian and biking safety, and the lack of, Menlo Park City traffic police around. And I have to say, like, a really big part of what's making life feel more normal is that we have, full-time school in session, and the parks are being used more than ever. And after school activities and sports programs and programming on our fields are in use. And so I've seen a lot of messages sent to city council, posted on Nextdoor, discussed at PTO meetings about the community themselves possibly looking to do some traffic policing and just looking out for pedestrians and bikers. So I think most of this is just kind of putting it on the record out here and making this commission aware that I think traffic safety isn't just something that maybe the bicycle or transportation or city council commissions really need to look at. It's for us too, because we want to make sure that the community is able to get to these recreational facilities and their events in a safe way. And unfortunately, there's been a lot of accidents lately, and many have been in the almanac and in the news and in Menlo. And so it's just something for just awareness. And I wanted to kind of put it out there in the public, since I know the mayor and the city council have definitely heard from people about it. So I just hope, as things progress to move in a very good and more normal environment, especially with children possibly 5 and up being vaccinated as early as next month, we're cognizant of safety measures and really like pushing that. If we want people out there using our facilities, make sure that we can use them in a really safe way and get there, especially if people are biking and walking. That's all.
Wow. Well, Commissioner Baskin, thank you for bringing this to our awareness. Safety is such a critical issue, and I know the structures in the parks a lot of thought goes into making sure those are safe. And this is a really interesting dimension you've brought to my attention, which is actually transporting to the parks and making sure that that's safe. Yeah, it's a really interesting thing, and I'm really glad you've made me aware of it. I'd love to hear other commissioner comments. Okay, it seems like other commissioners are taking this in. And then maybe the last thing that we'll do today, I have a short report. It's pretty quick, and I think it's more aiming to get people thinking and excited to review the pickleball program in the future. So if I may, Assistant Director Nick, can I share my screen?
Should be able to now.
Just get set up here. Okay, so we received a complaint recently that pickleball was quite loud from Menlo Park resident who lives in one of the apartment buildings behind the court. And so here to kind of highlight what resident brought up, I visited Neon Park and it recorded the audio near the pickleball and tennis court. So I'll play these brief clips.
Chair Thomas, I could not hear the audio. Now, my past experience with Zoom is that before you do the screen share, there's a box you have to check that says play computer audio. And I think it's unchecked by default. So you might have to unshare and reshare in order to check that box.
Okay. Share sound.
Yeah, it's something like that, like a little checkbox.
Library and Community Services Director Sean Reinhardt, can you hear the sound now?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So this is pickleball. Okay, pretty percussive. Here's the tennis court. Interestingly, it's actually hard. The pickleball nearby drowns it out. But if you listen closely, you can hear the tennis ball. So even right next to the tennis court, the pickleball is a bit louder. So yeah, one night I kind of made a measurement to just try to get like the peak noise level, just so we'd have some data to start with, and to kind of help everyone understand kind of the context here. On the right is a bird's eye view of Neon Park, and I'd like to draw your attention to kind of the bottom right. And so here you can see all the courts, and on the far kind of right corner in this orientation are the pickleball courts. And below them, I've had drawn what I've called kind of the impact zone. And that's where just like walking by on kind of on a quiet night while pickleball is being played, it was quite loud. Loud enough that it'd be discernible kind of inside a house. Interestingly, noise falls off is inverse radius squared. So us even like going slightly further away in distance from the court, the noise drops quite significantly. So even across Mill Avenue, this issue largely goes away. And in the future, I know we'll be reviewing the pickleball program. And so I'm sure we can have a further discussion at that time. But some things to think about are that I think this issue would largely go away if we switch the pickleball courts to other, to the other tennis courts that are further from any residences. And then another option, Berkeley faced a similar problem and installed some soundproofing, and that seemed to fix the issue there. So I just wanted to share this to get people excited. I know pickleball is an exciting and perhaps controversial issue, and we're going to discuss it a lot in the future. But I'm hoping that this is one facet of it that we can think about. I'd love to hear any other comments.
If I may, I'd love to piggyback on that. I know that we are having more formal discussions about the review of the 6 months and what have you. I had heard that there were some potential noise issues and such. As it turns out, my wife and I were in Park City, Utah, a few weeks ago. And one of the things on the agenda was pickleball. Maybe I had played once, but I played tennis, I played ping pong. I know we were talking about it. And there's a specific of, as a group, we're going to do pickleball in, particularly. We go to the place, and this particular venue was built as a pickleball court. It wasn't a converted tennis with lines that nobody can read. It's the size that we're discussing. And so, but it's a tennis court in its own separate thing, but it's the size of the pickleball court, and it's terrific. I got all excited. I took some pictures, and I'll certainly provide those. Whether or not I'm going to become the pickleball player that I am tennis player, I is an unknown. That said, I think that as a community, we probably need to stop thinking about, pardon my French, the half-assed approach, which is, well, maybe a kind of a conversion and maybe a possible net. But if we're going to relocate, let's dedicate 1 or 2 spots. I mean, this is a bigger, work agenda kind of thing, but it seems like we should potentially commit to actually building those things and not just this sort of conversion. I mean, look, the courts that we're using, never mind the sound, the court that we're using for pickleball conversion now is the premium tennis court. That's one. So fine, I'm the one who said, hey, let's use that court, let's dedicate that court. But to remove tennis courts, I mean, it seems to me that we should, and maybe it's getting rid of one altogether and just building, but the line thing, and it's kind of, I don't know, that's, in my mind, it's something else to think about.
We definitely have a lot to discuss in January, for sure.
Awesome. Well, on that note, I guess it's exciting. We have this joint meeting coming up in January. We'll review the pickleball. And on that note, I think we can adjourn this meeting. And it is now 7:51 p.m.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night.